we have Superintendent's report. I'll turn it over to Dr. Ross.
Madam Chair, members of the board, thank you so much for this opportunity to give an update on our school district. As we like to say, we are a system, and our system is an alignment of vision, mission, and outcomes. And over the last 6 months, we have gone through the process of answering the questions, why are we here? And with that answer, determine how do we accomplish that why, and with the how, actually measure the outcomes. And it's the community, it's the feedback that the community gives us that lets us know how we're doing. We were very excited at the beginning of the year to find our vision statement of loving and growing our students. We were very excited to work with our administrators as we determined what our mission was. And today, as we start in January, we are beginning the budget process. And the budget is, as much as it's facts and figures, it's also a philosophy of the academic, social, and emotional growth and development of our children. I asked our community and our staff, what is the role of schools when we think about our philosophy? What are we funding? And before you, you see the pictures of our oldest facilities in Chapin, in Irmo, and in Dutch Fork. And what was the role of the teacher in these facilities? When we think back to our education, we think about the teacher's responsibility as that of making sure that every child had the 3 R's, reading, writing, and arithmetic. But education is changed. When we think about our why, we find that the needs of our students are changing, and the needs of schools have changed. If you look throughout the landscape of education in our society, when there are behavior issues, the question is, what are the schools doing? When there are mental health issues, the question is, what are the schools doing? When there's physical health issues, the question is, what are the schools doing? When there's social issues, the question is, what are the schools doing? When there are public safety issues, the question is, what are the schools doing? A lot of times the teacher becomes the person that carries the weight of all of those responsibilities. It is very tough now for that teacher to have the same responsibility and the roles that the teachers had when these buildings were in operation. And so I'm going to ask that in a budget philosophy, we think about providing that whole child curriculum, continuum, providing the way that our mission statement of academic, social, and emotional needs for our children. As I look at our current staffing, staffing, I see that in that continuum we have some breaks and we have some intermittent parts in terms of physical health, mental health, and academic readiness. And so one of the proposals that I would like to bring forth, and again, this is just for discussion tonight, not for any vote, but what would it be to have a year-round nurse? We find ourselves in a pandemic and the need to continuously plan for the physical health of our students would take a year-round nurse enabled to help us to do that. We are seeing that now with the rising cases, that contact tracing alone is causing a lot of issues with our nursing staff. When we think about mental health issues, to have a mental health services officer, someone to help us with those mental health issues that are compounding and growing within our schools. When they ask, what are the schools doing, we want to be able to respond that we have someone standing in the gap. We find that unmet mental health issues result in behavioral issues. And so, yes, we are doing all that we can with our student services officer, but we want to make sure that we have someone working hand in hand on the mental health side to prevent that. We ask teachers a lot to do a lot. We ask them to make up the academic readiness. I saw it firsthand of students that I mentor, 8th graders with 1st grade reading levels. That exists in our district. It's very unfair to ask a teacher to be able to make up that and teach their lessons. That's just one example, but if you have 10 of those students within a class, that teacher can't possibly handle their job and make up the academic deficits that are there. So I'm asking for a lead school counselor to help us meet those needs in the gap. Things that we can do in the summer after school so that we can prepare our students to be ready. What I believe is that in order for us to protect our children from the range of the needs that are coming is to provide this whole child continuum, sort of like an umbrella. Any gap in the umbrella and the child gets wet. But if we can not stretch our teachers along this continuum, but provide help so that teachers who are responsible for physical safety, they have help. For when there's physical health issues in the classroom, there's somebody there to help. When there's social issues, there's housing or food insecurities, there's someone standing in the gap. There's someone to call on when there are mental health issues or behavioral issues, standing in the gap. And there's someone to assist the teacher when there is academic readiness issues, standing in the gap. And then the teacher can focus on those educational needs, which is a lot. If you think back to those earlier pictures, there was always someone there to help that teacher standing in the gap. Well, we need to make sure that we can make that connection. And I believe that if we can provide our teachers with this, that someone that is there to help them meet this entire continuum, and I think that we can go from protecting them from the range of these needs to the rainbow and the sunshine of their succeeding. It is this philosophy that I would bring to you, not to try to add to the budget, but to look at existing positions, ways that we can move things around in a way to provide all of these needs for our children. But as we talk about the philosophy of this, we need to make sure that we are linked hand in hand, that we're supporting our teachers so that they don't feel like they have to provide this all themselves. It is this, the philosophy, that I believe moving forward will allow not only our students to thrive, but our teachers to be able to succeed. Burnout is real, and we cannot load anything else on teachers. I know that when I call 911, I want somebody to show up and help and not coach me through it. And so we need to make sure that there's someone there to respond for our teachers and staff. And so with that, we had an awesome time trying to recruit teachers this weekend, and I want to thank Dr. Turner and her team. I know she's going to thank her team and Melanie Cohen and all the staff for what they've done. Dr. Turner, would you like to speak really briefly about this weekend's job fair recruitment event?
Thank you, Dr. Ross. We were excited because we ended up having 181 registered people interested in teaching in District 5. Of that, 167 actually attended the event, so that's very exciting news. I do want to recognize Melanie Cohen, the district's coordinator of personnel and lead recruiter, but I also need to recognize the more than 120 plus employees from each school who engaged with these interested applicants on recruitment day. They logged over 10,000 chats. So this was a very busy day engaging and talking about teaching in District 5. It was a successful event for us.
That is, we're really excited, and the reason why 167 attendees is very important is you look at this data from Sarah about teacher retention in South Carolina. The blue bar representing the teachers who have left the position the previous year. The green bar representing those who are in the teacher preparation program. What we see is that we're draining the pool of teachers faster than we can fill it up. And as that pool shrinks over 5 years, we're concerned about the teachers who are in the pipeline. And to be able to see the number of interested applicants to work in District 5 is very promising. We know that we want to do all that we can to support our teachers and educators, So whether it's school counselors or nurses, we want to make sure that we're doing all that we can to support them. We recognize, this is data before the pandemic, that 10% of new teachers leave the profession within their first year. Before the pandemic, that 44% of teachers leave the profession within 5 years. And so we want to do something about it. It took us looking at the new educators and what it would take to attract them. I wanted to make sure that when Dr. Turner and her team had the opportunity to recruit, that we had something attractive to bring them to School District 5. And we have great students, but everyone is going to argue that. We have great teachers, but everyone's going to argue that. And so if we look at our salary of our starting teacher, while it is competitive against our neighboring districts, we also offer a benefit package including of health care and 45 days of sick leave, 45 days they can earn in personal leave. We have our retirement, which is a little different from the Class 2 retirement piece. On our new teachers, their reality is that it's their age plus years of service must equal 90, or they have to be 65 years of age to get their retirement. That's a little different from the Class 2, which a lot of us are used to. But there's something else that I'm very worried about for our new teachers coming out. And this is data that came from the National Education Association, July 2021. The average new teacher, this is new teacher, the average new teacher is carrying about $58,700 of student loan debt. And if you do the math against what we're asking them to do and how much their compensation package, their debt is draining. And so we wanted, this doesn't need board approval, but board endorsement is what I asked. And I guess from the makers of $50 Fridays, we bring you NARI, which is the new Educator Retention Incentive. So you've heard of TERI, which is, this is for younger teachers, younger educators. And when I say young, I mean new to the profession. So if you can be 65, but if you're new to the profession, if you're in 0 to 3 years, or 0 to 2 years of experience, 0 to 2 years of experience, we give you the option of increasing your salary or decreasing your debt. And so this is not formatted correctly, but you can increase your salary or decrease your debt. $2,500 a year for up to 3 years. So that would be year 0, year 1, and year 2. And so we're excited about this. Again, this is an incentive applying on the younger, the earlier years of your experience, so years 0 through 2. 2 reasons. One, I think it makes the biggest impact for those people who are new to our profession financially. And I think also it's an incentive to those where we find that that's where we're losing teachers, a way to get them to retain in our program. So we're excited. The way that it would work is if they take the option of the increase their salary, then they get a $1,000 bonus in the first semester and a $1,500 retention payment in the second semester. That would be taxed. If they choose to go straight to student loans, then through a program through the Trump administration, then that is not taxed, and the full $2,500 per year could be going to their student loans. And so it's a way to help them attack some of the debt. So we're excited about this program, and it's all towards giving our teachers, especially those in the 0 to 2 years, an opportunity to focus on the educational needs of our students and not be so worried about their continuum in which they're worried about. So with that, we want to talk a little bit about ways that we're not only supporting our teachers, but ways that we're supporting our students and staff and how we're protecting them. And so I wanted Dr. Harris to come forward and talk a little bit about what we do for threat assessments. We've had some issues in our community, and we wanted to make sure that we communicated that when we do a threat assessment, that we are not putting anyone in danger, and there's intentionality behind it. So I asked Dr. Harris to come forward and explain how we go through these threat assessments.
Thank you, Dr. Ross and members of the board, general community. We're going to have Kelly Brown to come forward, who is our student services officer, whom you may mention up earlier, who actually manages, if you will, the threat assessment. She's been an active and integral part at the state level of developing and devising these plans throughout the state. So we thought it was most appropriate that she would actually make the presentation as she manages that. So we're going to turn the floor over to Ms. Kelly Brown to share that regarding the threat assessments.
All right, good evening. Ensuring the safety of our students at school is a responsibility for us all. Administrators, school building principals, teachers, district office staff, law enforcement, mental health professionals, parents, and students. So this process that I am going to walk us through tonight mandates that partnership and communication between all of those parties that I just mentioned, so we can provide support for our students and ensure that our schools remain safe. So let me start with the foundation. And by turning this on, okay. Following the tragedy of Columbine High School in 1999, the U.S. Department of Education and the Secret Service have worked to try and better understand and help prevent acts of school shootings in America. They examined 37 incidents of targeted school violence. And you may have heard this phrase, but that joint study is known as the Safe Schools Initiative. And that common goal between those two organizations was they are created to develop accurate and useful information about prior school attacks that could help prevent future ones from occurring. In 2019, another analysis was done by the Secret Service on targeted school violence, and they studied 41 additional incidents of targeted school violence in the schools of K through 12 and from the years of 2008 to 2017. And their report is an in-depth analysis of the motives, behaviors, and situational factors of the attackers. This analysis also identified that there is no profile of the student attacker, nor is there a profile of the type of school that is targeted. That attackers usually have multiple motives, that they may have used firearms, and those firearms were gathered from their own home. Most attackers had experienced psychological, behavioral, or developmental symptoms. Half of the attackers had interest in violent topics. All attackers experienced social stressors. Most attackers could have been victims of bullying. Most attackers had a history of school discipline action, and some had a history of law enforcement interaction. But all attackers exhibited behaviors of concern. So in both reports, the common thread is this: a multidisciplinary threat assessment approach in conjunction with tools and training is the best practice for preventing future tragedies. So that's what our threat assessment teams are. You gather professionals in the building with different backgrounds, different perspectives, different experiences with the student, and you put them in the same room discussing the same topic, and then you provide accountability and intervention for that student. Taking that nationwide perspective into District 5, taking that nationwide perspective into District 5 to make sense of how it came to be for us. In 2018, after the unfortunate events in Parkland, Florida, we started seeing some replica behavior with students using words that sounded alarming. And so we knew we immediately needed to equip our administrators with a tool to navigate through those powerful words and offer support for our administrators and offer additional support and intervention for our students. The second prong to that is anytime that there is after a targeted school violent attack, There are always after-action reports, and they are about 200 or 300 pages long. But those after-action reports go through every single detail of the incident, and it allows us to learn from it, to gather information from it so that we can apply it directly to our district. And so we have access to those reports, and along with our safety officers, we have reviewed those and taken that valuable information and applied it in areas of our safety and supporting our students. The third wheel to this, or the third component to this, is District 5. We were invited to participate on a task force that State Superintendent Molly Spearman created to pull together a task force to create and develop a threat assessment manual suggested for all districts across the state to use. And I had the opportunity to serve on that task force. In addition to that, we had Dr. Melissa Reeves, who led that task force for us. Dr. Melissa Reeves is what many would identify as an expert in the area of threat assessment. She has written 5 books on threat assessment. She is a former educator. She conducts workshops on threat assessment across the world on this. And so I have had, gratefully, the opportunity to maintain contact and connection with her. And so she has been willing to give her input, her feedback, and her advice as we have developed our practice in District 5. So you take all together everything that I have told you, and that is what and how we developed our process in School District 5 and our threat assessment manual. So for our district, every school has a threat assessment team. Our core members at our school threat assessment teams, we have our case manager, our administrator, a mental health professional, and our SRO. In addition, we can include other members to the teams that are teachers or mentors, coaches, nurse, or people with expertise, knowledge, or even external outside agencies who have been working with the family, and their insight, their advice and perspective is crucial. I say team intentionally because we never want one adult in isolation making a decision about the safety of a student or the safety of our school. Because the situation can be related to school safety, a code of conduct violation, law enforcement involvement, a possible expulsion hearing, and access to additional safety measures in our district, our administrators lead the school threat assessment teams. It is also intentional, as I said before, that we have a variety of team perspectives on each team as well. You'll see on the screen where it says lead screening and full assessment, and that is to just briefly note, we have various levels of our assessment as we take a comment that a student has made, and to assess that, we have multiple stages of our threat assessment process. Reiterating the goal of our school threat assessment teams is the 3-prong. We want to identify, assess, and support. We want to identify that when a threat is made or reported, we, of course, identify the immediate, if it's an imminent threat, and we identify the needs of the student by completing the threat assessment process. We assess to identify the risks, and then we support. We support the student for providing strategies to manage the risk, interventions, to change the behavior, and support for the family. As I always say, school threat assessment teams, they cannot predict the future of student behavior. They are not required to do that. But they are required to make decisions based upon the information that they have obtained in order to move forward with next steps that are in direct alignment with our threat assessment manual. Again, it goes back to accountability and intervention that must be implemented. Webster's dictionary defines threat as an expression of intention to inflict evil, injury, or damage. It is one that threatens. So we look at the threat as expression indicating an intent to harm someone, and we all know that threats can come in a variety of formats. It could be verbal, written, on social media, it could be artistic with drawings, it could be symbolic gestures. A pattern of escalating behaviors suggesting violence could be possible. I want to make a quick note before moving to the weapon piece that if a student makes a comment about harm to others or to our school building, that would activate our threat assessment process. If a student makes a comment about self-harm, that would activate our suicide protocol. So if a student makes a comment about self-harm and harm to others or the building, that would activate both process. One does not replace the other. It's different measures of intervention and support, so that would activate both our suicide protocol and our threat assessment manual process. Also, too, that with our weapons possession, of course, presumed to be a threat unless circumstances clearly indicate otherwise. For example, if a student has a pocket knife on campus, that immediately activates our threat assessment manual. We want to make sure and go through our assessment of connecting why the pocket knife was brought on campus. Our examples of weapon, I do want to make note, of course, weapons, we define those as anything that is used to inflict harm on someone else. And of course, we have dealt with situations this year of examples that could include our pocket knives on campus, our BB guns. But I do think it is important to note that as we have dealt with those incidents on our campuses, I have not had an expulsion hearing that has taken for a student, you are here because you brought this to school to harm someone else. The situations that we have dealt with so far on our campuses, it's more for the motive students bringing it to school to show their friend. It is they have gone on a trip over the weekend and brought it to school. It was in a jacket, it was in a purse, it was more or less brought by mistake or to show their friend, not to inflict harm on another individual, which I do think is important to note when we speak of weapons. But also, too, to note that you certainly can identify a weapon as anything on our campuses that could be used to inflict harm. Desks, chairs, pens, pencils, or whatever. So we can also identify that as a weapon if a student is using it inappropriately or to harm self, others, or disrupt the learning environment. So how are these threats reported? Of course, school personnel observes the threatening behavior or hears the statement and reports the concern to administration. Students may experience or observe the threatening behavior or hears the statement and report it directly to an adult on campus. We also have the utilization of our Stop It app. And we have had over 300 reports of stop, not on for threat assessment pieces and just alone, but our students utilize the Stop It app. They are sharing information. Every student wants to be safe on campus, and so they are asking for help, they are identifying concerns, and they are going to adults to get guidance and intervention. And certainly, we always invite and appreciate when parents or guardians contact the school to discuss concerns. Once a threat is made and reported, the school threat assessment team follows our process, our manual, our flow chart. And due to the confidentiality of that process, I can't go quite into the specifics, or it's harder to go into the specifics of that this evening. But I can tell you that we have one manual for addressing school threats on our campus. One process to make sure that we go through the flow chart, that we go through the documents, that we go through the avenues of intervention and support for the student while maintaining a safe environment for all. We use the information gathered in this threat assessment process to answer this essential question. Do the words sound threatening, or does the student pose a threat? So for example, if a student loses a basketball game at recess, and he is mad and frustrated, and he says a comment, I'm gonna hurt you, I'm gonna kill you, something very just emotional. That comment right there alerts our school threat assessment team. And we walk through the process with that statement, because of that statement with that student. Now, certainly the interventions are going to look different as we go through the stage one of that assessment process, and we walk through our process and identify at the end of the situation. He's got mad, he lost at a basketball game. So now we have identified how we need to hold the student accountable and what interventions need to take place. It may mean that school counseling needs to support him with different word choice. It may mean that the family needs to get involved so they know about the incident. It may mean that extra supervision on the basketball court for the teachers, that we circle back around with administrators to check in with that child. But it sends the message that we are going to swarm the student with support and communicate our expectations because we now know the identified needs of the student due to the threat assessment process. Now, on the other side of that, if a student makes a statement and there is true oomph to that statement to provide harm to someone else or to a school building, there's a whole nother process to that on the scale of our threat assessment, which requires law enforcement, which requires a very thorough process, a very detailed process, and that is an immediate accountability with followed up by interventions on that. This slide is here just to touch base on some of the different levels of our assessments when we're talking about the question, do the students pose a threat or do the words sound threatening? Now, certainly, we do not want our school threat assessments teams to go through the process alone. We want to make sure that they are supported, that they have training, that they are receiving guidance in those moments. So to help with that, we have a district. Not only does every school have a school threat assessment team, our district has a district threat assessment team, which is comprised of administrators and school counselors at every level across each area. Our district threat assessment team meets monthly, and our members have not only undergone state training, but also have undergone train the trainer course as well through the State Department with Dr. Melissa Reeves, who I mentioned earlier. These are our 4 goals this year, that we will provide the refresh and reminders, monthly videos to our mental health professionals, our administrators, and our school building principals, our social workers, so that as we are receiving this information, we can go, hey, let's build upon this, let's fill you with this information so that you can stay on top of the latest pieces of training. Each year, I meet with school counselors, school psychologists, social workers, and administrators. I meet with our SROs, and our SROs all have our threat assessment manual. This year, Dr. Melissa Reeves has completed training with our district threat assessment team, and on January 24th, she is meeting with all of our school threat assessment teams to provide further training for them as well. Every District 5 staff member has viewed our threat assessment video at the beginning of the year that sends the message to teachers of what to do when you hear these type of phrases, and then for them to also know that there is a process to handling this information. Anytime a threat assessment is completed, I am notified. I'm notified because it launches another layer of support for not only the family, but for the school administration. It allows our safety officers to get involved, to be a liaison between the school and SRO. It allows us to provide additional mental health services for that school or family. It allows for us to contact our lead social worker, Jennifer Feckel. It simply allows us to be informed, but then to also provide extra layers of support for our schools. And then certainly, of course, we collect the data. We do the data collection and discuss the trends, the hot spots, the interventions that are working with the students across our district, and it allows us to, or spearheads our next steps, our methods of support for our school threat assessment teams. So what do we do with all of this information? For our students, we want to continue to challenge them and encourage them to continue to ask for help, to speak up, to utilize the Stop It app, to report the concerns that you observe or experience, to tell your parents so they can contact us. What do we ask for our parents? We ask them to continue to monitor your child's social media, changes in behavior, changes in peer groups. If there are any significant life changes going on in their home, to let the school know. Going back to what Dr. Ross said about the continuum of supporting the whole child, that mandates the partnership with parents. To let us know and to check your child's belongings. Check their book bag, their purses, their car, so you can know and just follow up behind them that what they're bringing on campus is appropriate and acceptable. And for our administrators to continue to train and grow in our knowledge and as we provide intervention and accountability for our students. Of all of our threat assessments, I must say as I close, all the threat assessments we have done this year, I am extremely proud of our school threat assessment teams, our parents, and our students. The partnership has been incredible, the interventions have been life-changing, and the work of our school threat assessment teams is truly first class, and the partnership with outside agencies and law enforcement is beyond appreciated. So we look forward to our upcoming training and supporting our students, our families, and our school threat assessment teams. Thank you.
Are there any questions for this part, for the threat assessment, for Ms. Brown?
Any questions?
I have one question. I'm wondering, I know when there's been a threat, you're limited in what kind of information that you can share. But since some of these are occurring through social media and students may be kind of wound up about what they think is going on, is there part of the process that's a communication back to the degree we're allowed to say what really happened or didn't happen?
Sure. So one of the things that we look at is the disruption that comment brought upon the school. If the student, going back to the example of the student losing the basketball game, if he said it to one student and one student heard it, that is a restorative conference. That is an accountability, of course, and then bringing that student and the family, the victim of the family, notifying them, and that could sometimes be handled in that situation. When you have a situation that exceeds beyond just one, and then, of course, students want answers, and so they will create their own answers if they're not given answers from us as well. So certainly when we are supporting the school threat assessment teams, we talk through what is our communication and follow-up with our teachers in the building and with students too, so that we get the right message out there without breaking confidentiality, but getting the right message out there for sure.
Any other questions? Thank you so much.
Thank
We
you.
appreciate that. Dr. Ross.
Thank you, Ms. Brown. So on with that, in terms of providing the safety of our students, we want to talk about what we're seeing with our COVID dashboard. So I'm going to ask Director of Accountability, Mr. Holden, to come forward and walk us through what we're seeing in the recent spike with Omicron.
Absolutely. So thank you, Dr. Ross and the board. What we have seen in the days since returning from winter break has been an increase in our student and staff cases in terms of positive reports as well as quarantines. Now, what we've consistently said as well is that as you follow that data, that mirrors what we see in our community as well. So here is the 2-week incidence rate that traces Lexington and Richland counties back to July 1st. And you can see the 2-week incidence rate at that time started to climb up, culminating around September 8th, and then had a drop off after that. We then saw the cases actually drop below what DHEC considers to be a high risk level. That occurred in November. But what we saw was it's flattened out, kind of leveled out right below the high level, that threshold of about 201. And what we've seen in the last few weeks on that 2-week incidence rate from DHEC is a dramatic increase in the number of cases we're seeing in the community. Of course, winter break-ins, and what you see there, there's no gap here in the chart to indicate a break in school, but of course, if you look there, you do see January 4th labeled. The January 4th data represents data collected on January 3rd and January 4th that resulted in a student or a staff absence on January 4th. We've then continued to collect data from last Tuesday to last Friday, continuing today, which I'll go in tomorrow. What we've continued to see every day is an increase in the total number of students who are impacted and an increase in the total number of staff who are impacted as well. They've been different situations with each one of those, but we are currently, based on the numbers there, at a higher level than we've been at on the daily report at any point this school year in terms of the number of students and staff who are impacted, which means they're absent from school for a COVID-related reason. Either they're positive, or they've previously been reported as positive and are now isolated, or they are quarantined due to COVID. So that's where we currently are, but again, what we're seeing is that trend where if the community data indicates high levels of spread, which they currently do, you can see that Richland County is at a higher level than it's ever been. And I don't have the data included in this chart from last year, but that is the highest 2-week incidence rate they've ever had in Richland County, or that we've ever had in Richland County. And then Lexington County is approaching its highest level as well. So that continues to present challenges for students and for staff in terms of their health and physical health, but also in terms of quarantines and a variety of other issues that we see in our school. This time I'll turn it back over to Dr. Ross and the board if there's any questions.
Thank you, Director Holden. I'd like to, as we go through this, talk about some of the things that we have done. Specifically, you may have noticed that on December 31st, it was actually New Year's Eve, DHEC issued new guidance in terms of the quarantines and isolations. This coming from the decision of the CDC to find ways to lessen the amount of time in quarantine. We were given 3 options, 10-day, which we had already been on the 10-day quarantine or isolation, 7-day, or 5-day. We selected to go with 5-day, but we wanted to take some time because there was new vocabulary, there was new procedures. And so we took a week in order to make sure that we could get our staff ready. I'll be honest with you, we needed more time. This allows us to get students back into school, but our nurses, our pro nurses, if you look at these numbers, that represents more contact tracing for those nurses. And so we may not see the illnesses that we saw in Alpha or Delta, but the workload on that nurses station is also raised, quadrupled or 5x'd what we were seeing earlier. And so we're finding ways as we speak to get contact tracers to our nurses stations to give some reprieve to the nurses as they work through our new guidance. We believe that this guidance allows students to come back to school and our staff to come back to school as fast and safely as possible. And so we have put out a new communication. We'll be updating our website to reflect this. And we ask your patience as our team makes the shift to this. As you would know that no one is forced, and again I repeat this, no one is forced in our policy to have to go through the maximally vaccinated. If you talk to your doctor or your family and that's not your decision, then we have done all that we can. We have reduced our quarantine from 14 days to 10 days. And so you can still stay under the 10-day quarantine. This is an option to get students back on the 6th day if they have been maximally vaccinated. So again, as promised in the beginning, we would follow our health board. What's interesting and important to note is that previous to what we saw on New Year's Eve is that COVID-19 has been added to the South Carolina DHEC school and child care exclusion list. This has statutory reach as outlined in South Carolina Code of Laws, section 44-1, 140, and 63-13. And so, I'm sorry, South Carolina Code of Laws 6120. And it gives us that under this authority, students with these infectious diseases can be excluded. COVID-19 has been added to that. So our nurses, and again, I would like to reiterate, I know it's been a hard year on the line, but if you're in a nurses station, you have that responsibility of daily medications. You have that responsibility of any issue that would show up. The health issues of our students, from seizures to just the daily care that they have. And you throw on top of that the contact tracing. You throw on top of that the keeping records of when a student is supposed to come in, talking to parents and making sure that they are in line to the statutory obligations as outlined on the South Carolina exclusion list. That is a lot. And so we need patience as we implement it. We certainly thank our community for that patience there. But we have moved again from that, we still have the 10-day option for all students. However, if you do qualify as maximally, or you have the antibodies, then there's options for you. And this is out, this is laid out on our website in a nice little guide for you, COVID isolations and quarantines. So with that, I will pause for any questions about COVID-19 before we move on to our last item, which is the First Jobs Initiative.
Ms. Huddle?
Ms. Hammond, I don't have a question at this point, but I have a resolution that I'd like to introduce, and you just tell me if you'd like to do it now or after Dr. Ross.
Could we do the questions first?
Sure. I do have a question, though, too.
Okay. And I'll go to Ms.
Just to clarify, I think you, at one point you said, can exclude a student if they have been exposed but don't meet these guidelines. But just to make sure I understand, our interpretation is that DHEC has moved quarantine to the exclusion list. So DHEC is telling us we don't have any choice. This is not up to us anymore. They're saying these are the rules, you must follow them.
If you're going to follow the state law, then we have no choice. Yes, ma'am. Kirk?
Ms. Moore?
Yes, I have a question. Right here it states that a mask must be worn through day 10. Who's implementing that policy? Because a lot of times the nurse doesn't get a chance to get to the 8 teachers that one child may have. They're not sure if they were home because they were positive or they were home because they were quarantined. So how do we resolve that issue?
Yeah, that's tough. To be honest with you, Ms. Moore, we're working through that. I mean, I wish I said we had that squared up in 24 schools. We do not. The question was, do we have a child who the child is going to wear their mask through 10 days and they can be back in school today? Or because we didn't have that policy or those procedures laid out, that we wouldn't allow that. We decided to allow them. But just like head lice, if you have identified as being, you can come to school, you have identified as being in violation of the exclusions list, we would treat it just like we would for any other of those. That child's at school, they're identified as not being in compliance with the exclusion list, they go to the nurse's station until they're picked up.
So I'm hearing you correctly saying that if a parent is of the idea that their child does not have to wear a mask because they don't believe in it, we're stating that if that mask is not worn in the classroom or at school, they are then to go home.
Yes, ma'am. They would be outside, that family would be outside of the exclusion list for a number of the items that are on that list. Yes, ma'am.
You had a question, Mr. Lovelace?
Comment. So, Dr. Ross, I heard you say that in your handout here it shows a red, it says positive isolated, and we're trying to go to 6 days quarantine. Are we also doing the yellow and the green that are down here?
Yeah, so great question. We're doing the yellow and the green. So isolated for terminology is these are those who are actually, they are COVID-19 positive.
The comment I wanted to make, and this will go toward Ms. Huddle's resolution, I guess, that she's going to make, but just simply that, okay, it says on here, a record of positive tests within the last 90 days. Well, Omicron didn't exist in the last 90 days. So, I mean, you know, what do we, I'm posing this rhetorically because I know you're not DHEC, okay, I understand. But what are we testing for then?
If it's COVID-19 of any variant, then it would qualify.
Okay, that's it.
I had a question. I know we got our guidance from, where I am a teacher in a public school. And it seems that there was some confusion with federal government and the state government's definition of fully vaccinated. My understanding was it was if you had the 2 shots and not the booster, you still were fully vaccinated. Now on here, it's saying the 2 shots and boosted. So I think there's some confusion. I mean, I just want to be sure what we're doing.
That's if eligible.
If
So-
eligible,
so
okay,
the-
right, well, there's certain ages, yeah,
Right.
I understand that. And then the other one that I was asking is CDC and DHEC actually were in conflict, if I'm not mistaken, but we follow state law.
We
I mean,
follow.
that's what we were told, I was told today by my district, we're going by state law, because the state controls that, not CDC. So those are just two things I was just saying. I know we had a lot of teachers and administrators that felt like it was confusing. So, because it's been changes and it continues to be changes.
We're tracking, Dr. Harris, 6 or 7 updates, 6 updates
Right.
now. And so to be honest, we were going to have our lead nurse come tonight, but she's calling parents and she'll be doing that into the late hours with the rest of our nurses, contact tracing. So we understand, I know it's going to be argued about, the decoupling of sickness to the incident rates, but operations-wise, we have to keep track of all of these. And it kind of 4 or 5x us in terms of that workload. So we are praying for our nurses and our front office staff that are dealing with this. We're bringing help. I want that to be noticed. We're bringing help as we deal with this. And so we hope just as it came in, it goes away, and we can get back to level greens that we enjoyed during this year.
And my other understanding, I would just say for teachers and students and any employee within a school, I think with this variant, there's lots of asymptomatic, kids that aren't really very sick at all, and so they're not being tested by, the parents just, the common cold, they may not realize I need to go test them and it's going to show this. So it's almost like, and I'm asking this, it's almost like the honor system for some people. I mean, if they have not, they're not sick
not
and you've
tested,
taken to the doctor and you've gotten it confirmed. So I just, I can understand how your sympathy's going to our nurses. So I just want to make it all, it's not cut and dried, what we're in right now in this variant.
Thank you for that. And I'd like to end the superintendent's report with a program I thought was just very well done in terms of its layout, and that's our First Jobs Initiative. Right before the winter break, the Thursday of the winter break, we had our first class go through at Irmo High School, and I thank Dr. Hardy for hosting us. They did an amazing job. And we work with students in for facilities, transportation, administrative, and student nutrition. They had a great welcome, and I thank our board members who were able to attend. Ms. Gardner and Ms. Blackburn-Hines were also in attendance there. And we started out with our resume assistants, and they worked with our chiefs. All of our chiefs were back in the classroom leading a group, and our directors were back in the classroom leading a group of students on how to write a resume, how to look at some of your talents and situate your talents on the resume. And then they attended our job fair, and they were able to go and meet our staff and talk to them, actually be recruited in the different areas at our job fair. They were able to pick out some of the uniforms and do a vote on some of the uniforms that Mr. Beadmo had displayed for them. And we treated them as superstars. They were really recruited. Dr. Turner gave them a swag bag with a lot of goodies in there. And I want to thank Mr. Beadmo and Food Services. They put on a great luncheon for the students. But I want to thank you all as a board for this program. For a lot of students, when any seed does not grow, you don't blame the seed. You look at the soil, you look at where it was planted. And all students need is an opportunity. You give them an opportunity, they'll shine. And these are just 3 messages from students that say, I want to give my thanks to you for coming to our school and introducing us to an amazing opportunity. I and many others are very grateful. Another say, I want to thank you so much for everything you provided for us. You gave us a chance to be able to have opportunities to benefit us in the future. I appreciate you. I appreciate you have hope, that you have hope for each of us. And a student, I think, who took us all, took all of our hearts. A student who failing classes, struggling academically and behaviorally, but was the star that day. And our student says, one day I would love to be able to work with you. I am more than capable of being successful again. You know, just to have that notion that that child believes that success is on the horizon for them. These are their words, not ours. You gave them an opportunity that they have really stepped up, and so we appreciate you providing that for them. So this pilot at Irma High School, we look to learn from it and to be able to expand throughout the district. So with that, I would like to conclude the superintendent's report and stand for any questions.
Ms. Huddle, did
Do
you?
you want to see if there are any questions about First Jobs?
Yeah, anything about First Jobs?
Yeah, I just wanted to say that, as an interim superintendent, you brought this team together and actuated on some ideas that this board had, and I want to congratulate you on that, because that First Jobs initiative is important. I mean, it's including everyone in the system, and not just the achievers that normally get accolades. So I want to congratulate you on that.
Ms. Gardner.
Sorry, I don't really have a question either. I just have a comment. I just wanted to say that I was appreciative to have been able to attend the first little meeting that they had, and I didn't really understand that some of these kids were really, this might be their last chance type feeling, because they didn't present that way. They had hope, and they were dressed nice, and they were very well spoken and excited to be there, and I had no idea, and it was wonderful, and I'm glad that we have this opportunity to help them see their value and their worth, because they definitely have it, and I'm glad to have been a part of it, so I appreciate the invitation to be there.
It is an exciting program. It truly is.
I have a question on another topic. Can I go back to it?
Of his report?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, sure.
Just as a comment, I can do the acronyms too. So I did one for the educators in here. CTCI, EI. Even I can't get it out. Existing Teachers Continuing Education Incentive. Okay, and I would like to see the program. I call it NERO. You call it NERI, but I
like NERI.
NERO would be a new educator retention opportunity, but anyway, so I would like to see us expand that to continuing education for teachers, so that they could get into the spirit and be renewed, because job enrichment and renewal is also a reason why you lose people after the 5th year. Okay, and I think that if we could expand that, we'd have something going that wouldn't quit here.
So you're looking after the teachers that have been there a while, not just those that are new. Thank you. Anything else before we leave that to number 10?
Ms. Hammond, I have a resolution. I move that we pass the following resolution. Regarding the South Carolina Department of Health, DHEC's exclusion for COVID exposure. Whereas DHEC and COVID exposure whereas DHEC added COVID exposure to the school exclusion list in 2021 with an update added in 2022. Whereas DHEC is setting quarantine rules based on vaccination status, even though the CDC has stated that their own data showed similar viral load between vaccinated and unvaccinated, and the CDC and multiple states have reported extensive breakthrough infections among fully vaccinated individuals. Whereas DHEC's exclusion list provides a shorter quarantine period for students wearing a mask, regardless of the type of mask, and despite the state's budget proviso prohibiting the requiring of masks, and despite numerous studies demonstrating the ineffectiveness of cloth masks in preventing the spread of the Omicron variant of COVID. Whereas neither requiring vaccination nor requiring cloth masks appear to prevent the spread of Omicron, whereas the risk that Omicron will cause hospitalizations or severe disease in children is currently small relative to many other health issues, whereas it is extremely important to take to the academic, social, and emotional growth of children for them to attend in-person school as much as possible, whereas it is unfair and an economic hardship to parents who have to stay home with healthy children who are quarantined, whereas it is an undue burden on teachers to have to keep up with mask rules for individual students and to have to catch up students who have missed school due to unnecessary quarantines for healthy children, whereas it is inappropriate for a state agency to impose ineffective rules on a school district without funding to support such rules. Be it resolved that the Board of Trustees of School District 5 of Lexington and Richland Counties request that DHEC reevaluate its COVID exclusion rules to limit required quarantine only to students who are symptomatic or who have tested positive, and remove any and all quarantine rules based on vaccination status or mask wearing.
Would you like to address this?
Actually, I'd like to second it so that we can discuss it.
So we can discuss
Yeah.
it, excuse me.
I think it's
I'd
pretty
like you to-
self-explanatory, but I would like to add that I feel that DHEC's rule is very intellectually dishonest. They know that vaccine status does not matter in the spread of this disease. And they know that cloth masks are basically useless, and that this is political and is putting our children at risk. It is keeping children out of classrooms. They are trying to force the vaccine on children. Okay, well, if you want to do that, do that. But don't make up rules that are trying to do the same thing, even though it doesn't make any difference. Our children need to be in school.
Ms. Moore?
I think for us to sit here and not understand what the teachers are going through in the classroom about the interruptions that are happening, we've yet to ask the teachers what they want. The teachers would love for the kids to be in school, but at the end of the day, the teachers want to know that they are safe, and they want to know the children are safe. I understand that it's a hardship to be able to stay home with your kids if they're quarantined, or if they're sick, or if we have to go virtual, but did you all just not look at the numbers that we're looking at? Like, we are seeing extremely high numbers in Richland and Lexington County. And so we're going to sit around here and we're going to say, oh, let's not follow DHEC and let's pretend that it's political when we're talking about people's lives. This isn't a game.
Ms. Gardner?
Yeah, I think just to go back to the point of this resolution is that we know we have to follow DHEC to follow the law. And this resolution is that we're asking DHEC to assess their quarantine policies, because obviously if they think the Omicron variant is not that big of a deal and that you only have to be out for 5 days if you've been vaccinated, even though we know you can still get it and pass it, they understand that it's not, they must think it's not that big of a deal. They must think that, or it wouldn't be in their policy. So they shouldn't have a 10-day to make sure that it's harder for these other people who have not been vaccinated or forced to wear masks in a scenario when it doesn't work. So they're playing games, and this is all political, and it's frustrating to us because our main objective as a school district is to educate. It frustrates me that we're asking for more money. The school district needs more money and needs full-time nurses. We are not a healthcare organization. It shouldn't be under our purview. Our teachers shouldn't have to worry about this, and maybe our nurses, if we gave them the opportunity to not contact trace, they could actually see if there were students that had symptoms, because that's what we're concerned about. This resolution is about protecting our healthy children. It's not about if they come down with a symptom. I would love for someone to recognize that and make sure that that's followed up with, not because Johnny was sitting next to Sue and Johnny had a COVID test. I'm only worried about Sue if Sue maybe has a fever, or maybe she's sniffling. That's what we need to be worried about, not contact tracing every little thing that we're doing. And so that's what this is about. This is a crisis, and we understand that, but we're probably, and this is according to Nikki, there's going to be schools shut down probably next week because we're going to hit that maximum threshold of quarantines. And it's going to be our healthy children, not the ones we should be focusing on, which is the ones that we should be watching for symptoms, which nobody has time to do because we're doing all the other things. And it's not fair to the teachers. This also applies to them. They have to be quarantined also. Our teachers have to be also, and many of them don't have any time left. They're going to have to do it without pay. That's not fair to them if they're healthy. We're not talking about teachers that have symptoms or that are not healthy. We're talking about the healthy ones. So that's what this is about, and I support this resolution.
I would like to give each board member at least a minute to say how you feel. Mr. Hogan?
Yeah, if I'm, excuse me, if I heard Dr. Ross correctly, I mean, per DHEC, we follow the letter of the law, and unfortunately, regardless of our interpretation of it, we follow that. And this resolution is essentially asking DHEC if they'll consider revisiting it and looking at their data and possibly coming with a happy medium. I'm fine with that.
Mr. Lovelace?
The only thing that I have to say about it is that, a lot with this has come about with unintended consequences. And since we started, I mean, I feel like a veteran of a foreign war having gone through this. But anyway, I don't know enough to say that somebody's playing politics with something, and I don't know enough to say that they're not. Okay, so I wouldn't, I'm not sitting here trying to presuppose that. And I just wonder if we could get we have an administration that is in the trenches every day with this, okay? And I don't know enough to cast doubt on it one way or the other. I do know that, and to Ms. Huddle's point and to everybody's point up here, what we're trying to do, folks, is keep the kids in school where they belong. And I don't know that this is productive or counterproductive, and I'd like to hear just something, from the administration to tell us what they think. I mean, are these things doable? Because when you sit down here and you read one thing that says that if you had a positive test in the last 90 days, but that means you're testing for something else that didn't even exist now. So, I mean, that leads you to believe that I'm sure that DHEC is trying their best to keep kids in school. I'm sure they're trying to do that. I know that they wouldn't intend to do anything different. But just to, I would like, before we go and pass something that says, that our whole school district believes one way or the other, that we do at least get the administration's take on it. Now, I may be putting you on the spot, Dr. Ross, but I don't know. But, that's important to this group, or we wouldn't be talking about it.
And I'll weigh in. I certainly agree we're going to follow the law. If I'm understanding it, like I just saw this tonight, I have no problem with saying to them it's confusing, and maybe we need more clarity. But I'm certainly not here saying that, I don't think anything DHEC's doing that everything DHEC is doing is wrong, because I agree with what you just said. They're trying their best too on a continuously moving target. So I will acquiesce to Mr. Lovelace's request, because how do you feel like that it puts your administration in any kind of, I guess for lack of a better word, any kind of bind that we're simply as a board saying we'd like them to revisit their requirements and make them more clear?
The administration's position is we don't have the luxury of having an opinion about statutes. We're not a policy arm, we're an administrative arm. So once we get a state statute, now we have to lean on our team and determine on exactly how to implement it. I think our issue is that when a position changes 6 times or adjusts 6 times throughout a pandemic, that becomes very hard. And I understand the position of DHEC, but we follow the state board, not just on COVID-19, but the temperature in which we can serve our food, how long we can be in a building before without running water, the temperature in which a student can be in the classroom before we have to dismiss. So there's so many other things that we determine which chemicals we can have in a science lab, the wastewater, and all of these issues that the state board gives us, we have to then follow. What we see with COVID is there's a lot of changes, and then we have to kind of make that midstream. I can tell you this, though, it is very taxing on the staff, and we want our students in, we want to protect our teachers. We recognize that we have lost people to this horrible disease. It's emotionally draining. But I think to the notion of unfunded, right, once all of this is set up, now we need staff, and that's part of the umbrella that we talk about. If it's going to be on the school to fix it, then we would have loved to have contact tracers with this. We would have loved to have, full-time lead nurses, nurse supports for our schools. And so, however, our position is we're not a policy arm, so we have to implement what has been passed.
I'd like to ask Ms. Mahoney, would you give us a little definition? A resolution is simply something the board would like to see done. It's not, we certainly know we as a board don't control DHEC. But does it have, what is the purpose of a resolution as far, give us a good, a generic definition.
I haven't seen the document. I heard it read by Ms. Huddle, but I'm assuming it's just more of a statement of what the board is feeling about something. It's not an action. It's a statement that you're releasing and agreeing on. Is what I would interpret it to be.
Okay.
I'm assuming that's kind of what the intent is.
It's more of a belief that we are saying that a board. I mean, I
or
know
or a message that the board is voting to say this is what you believe.
Okay, thank you.
That's what I'm assuming. Again, I haven't studied it. I just heard it as I was sitting here.
Thank you, though. Thank you. I think I was just asking generically as resolutions go. I think you just gave me a good word, message. Ms. Huddle, did you put that? You put that in the form of a motion, right? And we had a second.
Yes, ma'am. I move that we adopt the resolution.
Okay. Well, all those in favor of adopting this resolution, again, which is simply a message to DHEC. 1, 2, 3, 4. And those opposed? 1. So, I'm sorry, I didn't count. 2 opposed and 4 carried. Thank you.